Welcome, welcome, welcome to a long overdue episode of Find Your Free, the podcast. I am your host, Rachel Voss, and it has been quite some time since I sat down to record. Over a year, I think. And believe me, I have thought about this podcast often. I have missed this space. I really love this space. It's a space that's really organic to me, a place where I can naturally be me by way of being a talker. But it's just a space that I feel like it gives me a chance to share. It gives me a chance to build community, to tap into community. I don't know, it just feels like a really organic space for me. And it's a space that I have missed in this time since I have recorded. And there were many times when I thought, okay, I've had an idea, or I'm gonna record today, I'm gonna do it. And either life would happen or it just didn't feel like the right moment, honestly, to sit down. And the way that this space feels organic to me, I want to make sure I move organically with the space, right? So I don't want to force it. I don't want to make myself just put something out there. Um, I want it to feel like, okay, I'm sitting down to record this. I'm in a good place. I feel connected. I feel centered. I feel grounded. So yeah, I was sitting at my desk tonight and just kind of going through my personal to-do list, and I have a quiet moment in the house, and it just really fell on my heart. Like, go ahead, give it a shot, record, and let's see what happens. Um, in all honesty, I was in the shower last week, and in the shower is where I get so much of my ideas, where I brainstorm. The shower is also the place where I have all kinds of conversations, conversations that have never happened. But if they were to go a certain way, this is what I would say. Conversations around, man, if I had just said this in a conversation that actually happened. And I know I'm not the only one, right, that has like those shower conversations. Certainly a practice where you can get lost and then you have to catch yourself and say, okay, let me come back, to the present. So I have a lot of shower conversations. The shower, of course, is where I'm also a fabulous singer. But the shower is where I tend to brainstorm, is where I tend to get a lot of my downloads. So sometimes I'll be in the shower and words will just fall into my head with regard to like my newsletter or say like an Instagram post if there's something I've been thinking about sharing. Sometimes the words will just come, like they'll literally fall into my head. And I'll just go and I'll write, and just other ideas, for things I want to do with regard to like my yoga offerings, my life. And so last week I was in the shower and the words the middle came into my head. And initially, it felt like something I would have to write. Writing about the experience of now being 45, of being at this middle age, of all the things that I'm trying to do in this space, all the things that I haven't done in this space, all the things I thought I would do, by the time I reached 45. And it still feels like something I'm going to write about. But then as I thought about what I would write, it felt like, oh, this is going to be like, that could be a really good podcast too. Like that could be a really good way to like return, back to the podcasting space because, it's because I've been managing this space of being in the middle, right? That like there's been a little lack of motivation as well as, like I said, just kind of life, like all the things that have kind of prevented me from recording any moment before this moment. Um, and so, yeah, so I thought, okay, I'm going to write about this, but I'm also going to podcast about this. And when it's the right time, I'll record. And again, now feels like the right time. So, in the past, if you have listened to my podcast before, so episodes 1 through 24, kind of doing it all off the top of my head. Yeah, I think I had 24 episodes. I didn't quite make it to 25. So, this episode is 25. Um, but when I recorded, actually, not even episode 24, when I recorded episodes 1 through 23, we were still living in Maryland. We had this basement space that we set up where my love, David, would like record his music, record his own podcast, kind of, do his thing. And it was where I would record my podcast. So it was a very like insulated space. We had like a studio, like this mini studio set up. And I honestly felt like the audio, like everything was like super clear. And so we haven't really been able to create that same kind of space in this, new home that we're in Georgia. We've been able to carve out spaces for yoga and spaces for, Dave to kind of have like his man cave space. But the insulated space, I haven't really been able to kind of like create the way that we had it in Maryland. And so with me trying to just like, with me having just this inspiration to like just record now, I had to kind of find the best space that was insulated. And so I'm like, oh, the closet. So I'm in the closet in our room with the door closed. Just which is actually cool. It's like it's creating this very cozy space for me to record. But I honestly have no idea what the audio is going to sound like on the other side. So hopefully it's clear. Hopefully it feels cozy. That's what I loved about the space that we had in Maryland. Like it made the podcast come across like a cozy space, which is always like my intention, which is like another thing I love about this space. It's like sitting down to have a cup of tea with somebody, right? And just talking about life and all that comes with it. So yes, I'm here in this closet, just kind of with my tea and me and a book and something I'm going to share at the end of the podcast. So yeah, and I think, you know, thinking about Maryland and talking about the space that we had there with regard to like the basement and being able to record probably is a good segue into why this podcast, right? Why this episode, The Middle. Um, and I'm just going to say, like, right off the top, 45 feels like it got here really fast, right? Like, I remember being in my 20s and being in college and thinking like, oh, when I'm 45, this is what life is going to look like. I'm going to have 4 kids. I'm going to have this career. I want to be like on my way to retirement because at the time when 45 was in the distance, it seemed like 45 was like a real accomplishment to be able to retire by that age as opposed to, like 60, 65, 70s or whatever. And so there was just always like, this is what life is going to look like. But 45 seemed way off. And then just, year by year, inch by inch, milestone by milestone, it kind of got closer and closer and closer. And then last October, 2022 is when I turned 45. Um, and some of you who follow me on Instagram and, on Facebook know that like my love, he coordinated a beautiful surprise party, had family and friends come in from out of town. Amazing that he was able to pull it off because to know me is to know that I ask all the questions, that it is really hard to get something by me. Um, Not in the way where like I'm always snooping or, anything like that, but it's just I'm very like aware, and I always kind of want to know like what's going on, what's going on. And so it was really amazing that he was able to pull that off. So I had this beautiful surprise party for my 45th birthday. It was also my first birthday without my dad. And as I've shared, I'm sure in the last podcast that I recorded, but I'm sure it's as well as some point before, that I actually share a birthday with my dad. I was born on my dad's birthday, made it by just, I think like 13, somewhere between like 13 and 17 minutes. I just made it on his birthday. And so he was alive on our birthday in October 2021, but then he passed in November 2021. And so, and that time frame was 2 weeks apart. So it was my first birthday, without my birthday twin. And then 2 weeks later, it was the first year anniversary of his passing. So just, a heavy emotional space. Um, but it was, to have this surprise party and to be showered with all of this love was like a really beautiful way, right, to be able to navigate through that otherwise emotionally heavy space. And was honestly a little overwhelming too, right? Because I'm so used to being the giver. I'm so used to like holding space that it can be difficult for me sometimes to like receive, and in such an abundant way, where all these people are like, hey, we're here because we love you. Like, it's awesome. I'm grateful and it is a huge blessing, but it definitely like can feel like a little overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, like you really love me, but I'm definitely grateful. Um, but yeah, 45. So it's here. And, again, I don't know how like I got here so fast, right? And my life does not look anything like what I thought it would look like. And so when I bring it all the way back to how thinking about Maryland kind of segues into all of this, Maryland, living in Maryland, I was there for 21 years on the nose when we moved from Maryland to Georgia. And it's funny, I moved to Maryland from New Jersey. So I grew up in New Jersey, right outside of New York City. So I'm like a New York City metropolitan area kind of girl. Went to college in Philadelphia. And then I moved to Maryland to go to graduate school in DC. I went to American University in DC. And when I first moved to the Maryland, DC area in 2000, I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to get this degree and I'm going back. I'm getting like my penthouse in New York City because like that was what I always envisioned. Again, that I'd have this like hotshot career and I'd live in my penthouse in New York City and have this fabulous Calvin Klein wardrobe and just, all the things, right? So it was never really my plan to stay in Maryland. And I'm sure I've shared this in an episode before, but it wasn't even really my plan to go to Maryland. So at the time when I graduated college, I was just started dating my now ex-husband slash son's father. And he had this vision of moving to DC. He wanted to go to Howard for grad school. Like he kind of had the plan for what was next. And like while I had the plan for my life, like what I wanted it to look like, I really had no idea like what the immediate next step was going to be, graduating from college after I graduated from college. And so, I'm like, all right, well, if you're going to DC, like I'll just go to DC with you and figure it out. And I looked up graduate schools in the area. And when I came across American University, it had a tagline that said, for people who want to change the world, American is the place to be. And I'm like, well, that's what I want to do. So let's go. And I applied, I got in, and the rest is history with regard to American. But that's really how I came to Maryland because I was basically, following after the guy that I was dating and just kind of seeing how his plan could work for me, right? And then ultimately we did break up actually before we moved to Maryland. Then we got back together some time after in Maryland, got married, had Voss, and then got divorced. And the rest of that is history as well. But anyway, I say all of that to say that when I first moved to Maryland, I didn't really see myself there for the long run. It just was not like I was constantly comparing it to like where I was from, was constantly comparing like DC to New York, like the amenities I had in that area versus what, was down here. Like bodegas, if you know anything about New York City, like just being able to like go to a store at, any time to get a like proper slice of pizza. And I remember even trying to find like a slice of pizza down in Maryland. And it was like everywhere I went, it was like, no, like you have to get a pie. And so just things like that, I was like constantly comparing. And in that way, I was not allowing Maryland to be Maryland. I was not allowing DC to be DC. And I always say it probably took me about mm, 5 years before I really just kind of let that go and said, okay, DC is DC, New York is New York, Maryland's, Maryland is Maryland. I'm still here 5 years later. So, we're going to make the most of it. And, eventually Maryland became my life. And it is the place where I got my first job out of grad school. So where I started my proper career post college. It is where I got married. It is where I had my son. It's where I got divorced. It's where I experienced a house fire, where I bought, my first condo, my first place, like, my life, the life that we are sort of on course to build, right, in our 20s and 30s. That was all in Maryland, and it was just a very significant moment, in my life. And I, it's funny, like I always had the sense that I wouldn't spend my final days in Maryland. Like I would always say that, like, I don't see myself spending my final days here, but I never knew like what was next or where to go. And I also felt strongly like that Georgia would never be like in my plans. It was like I was never going any further south than Maryland. Um, and life showed up 2021. I think I've shared that story in a podcast, how we got here. My kid got into a private high school here. We decided to give it a shot. They made it possible for him to attend. And here we are. And everything happened so fast in that time period from when we moved from Maryland to here. My father was still in the body at that time, but very much in a place where it was like, okay, it feels like his transition is going to happen any day now. My kid was starting high school, so there was just all of that, like just that transition and acceptance of like he's growing more and more towards becoming like his own man, you know what I mean, and further away from being the baby that I gave birth to and that I raised. And so there was just a lot happening at one time, and so much so that you just really have no choice but to just kind of get in the driver's seat and just go, just kind of like not think about it and just go. Um, so we moved to Georgia, and then shortly after my dad died. He died about 3 months on the nose, actually, from when we moved here. And so began that journey of grief, right? Of losing a parent. So he's the first parent that I've lost. I have my mom and my dad, and I have my stepmom who has been in my life for 30 plus years now. And so now I have my two moms, basically, right? Now that my dad is gone. And it's interesting, like I know that nobody, like owns the grief process. Like, even if we think we do, right? Like, we don't really own the grief process. Like, I have learned, not even just with my dad, but with other people that I've lost, that, grief shows up when grief shows up. It rears its head when it rears its head. You hear a song, you're in a place, a memory just kind of is triggered, and you're in, a space of having grief. So I'm really aware of that. Um, but it's interesting with my dad, and I guess because I have these tools of like yoga and meditation and people that I listen to that give talks, around being present, around managing grief. I love Tara Brach, love Tara Brach. And I listened to a lot of her when my dad was in a lot of her talks when my dad was in that space of transitioning. And so I have places where I can go. And, you know, things happen as they're meant to happen. And for me and my journey, I feel like this transition happened when I would be prepared to like deal with it. Cause I've always had this like fear of like, oh my God, what happens when my parents go? And here I am, dealing with that. And so the practice of yoga, not so much the physical practice, not so much what we do on the mat, but just the practice of just being, like coexisting um, with something as big as grief and the grief of losing a parent. Like it really anchored me into the present or presence, I guess, of what was happening. So in other words, there was no denying it, right? Like my father was gone, and I didn't really see myself go through the stages of like anger or denial or bargaining. Like I didn't see myself going through that, almost to the point that I thought there's something wrong with me because I'm not angry. And, it, I immediately went to this place of gratitude when my dad first passed, in the sense that, you know, when you get to, at this time, I had just turned 44. So when you get to that place, you've met enough people that, people who never knew their dad, right? Like their dads passed before they were born, or their dads passed when they were young, or just whatever, experience they might have had, where I got to have my dad for 44 years. And while I certainly feel and believe deep in my heart that there could have been so much more time, um, I also had him for 44 years, right? Like, and so I was grateful for that. I am grateful that we were close, that he knew I loved him, I knew he loved me, and like, as they say, there were like no cut cards between us, right? Like we were cool, and it was beautiful to have, and a blessing to have that like peace in my heart, right? So I wasn't angry. Um, but I was sad, and I'm still sad. I'm sad that he suffered from dementia. I'm sad that it literally went from like one day he was fine to like the next day, he has like a brain injury, like something like a brain bleed happened, like just suddenly. And then like everything just went from there. You know what I mean? And from the time that he had the brain bleed to when he passed was just about like a year and a half, so it all happened so fast, right? Um, and really what still lingers is like I'm always going to be sad that my dad is gone, in that way. Like I'm always going to miss my dad. But in terms of like stuff resonating, I'm just really like, there's just profound sadness that he had to go through that, and that it just feels like he was just snatched from us so quickly, because it was like, he was gone with the dementia before he left the body. And that's just a really very tough place, to be and to watch, your loved ones go through. And so there was no anger, just this like sadness. And kind of feel like I'm all over the place, but I know I'm going to get somewhere. And so, saying all this to say that when he passed, I embarked on this journey of grief, right? And just this journey of like life without my dad. And I think most of us who have lost a parent might resonate with the feeling of like life before the parent passed and then life after the parent passed, right? Because it's just life is just different, once they're gone. And I think I know, at least I feel like I'm realizing now, more in the present day, that that grief was so big and so just, you know, heavy, and just losing my dad was just so big for me that it kind of, I didn't see the other things that I was also grieving in that same space. So in other words, like leaving Maryland, just moving from Maryland in general, kind of the life I left behind in Maryland, what I had built up in Maryland with regard to my yoga work. And really in the past like month or so, I've been starting to realize that, right? So what has happened is, I started navigating this grief journey with regard to losing my dad. And, you're trying to keep up, I'm trying to be graceful, I'm trying to be mindful, I'm trying to do all the things while also honoring, what I'm managing, what I'm going through, what I'm feeling. But, I'm trying to do my best to like navigate it. Um, but I also realized that the way my grief was showing up was lack of motivation. Like I just didn't really feel like doing much. I didn't feel like teaching. I didn't feel like, I didn't feel like being in my purpose, like there would be moments where I would hold a class, or I would, have like a yoga session or something. And I always feel full, when I hold a yoga class, when I hold a wellness offering, I always feel full when I share space. And I would feel it in those moments, but I was also in just such a heavy place. It didn't, just kind of like today with this podcast, like, it didn't, I had to wait until it felt like organic for me to kind of be back to like Rachel Voss Yoga, and all the things that came with that, right? I just couldn't find that motivation. But then ultimately, not doing the work, right? Not doing the work that I feel I've been called to do in this world, that also fed into like the lack of happiness I was feeling, right? Because I do find so much joy in the work I feel called to do. And so that lack of happiness kind of kicked into the lack of motivation. The lack of motivation creates more of a lack of happiness. And, here I am sort of stuck in this cycle. And so, my love, he turned 45 just this past January, and we were able to go to Barbados, during his birthday. We were able to be there for a couple of days before his birthday and a couple of days after. So we had a nice 9-day trip. in Barbados, which is where his mother's family is from. So it was really beautiful to be there, to share that space with him. I'm gonna save the experience of Barbados for another episode because that can be an episode in and of itself. But it was just a beautiful experience, a beautiful time. Um, but it served as a reset, for me and David, as a couple, it served as a reset, but individually, it served as a reset as well. And for me, it felt like the trip broke up a lot of the stagnation I was feeling from the sadness, right? A lot of this lack of motivation. So I came back and not like it was like I was fired up on all cylinders, but I was ready to take the next step, right? Whatever the next step was. And so it's like, all right, let me slowly but surely get back to the business of Rachel Voss Yoga. So before we moved, I had started working on like a redesign of my website. I had a whole like website designer I was working with. She helped me rebuild the thing from the bottom up. And there were so many times when this website could have been done way ahead of when I finally turned on the new website, right? But again, just there was all this life. I wouldn't feel motivated. And it ended up taking from like March 2021 to like February of this year before I finally turned on this new website, my new website. And in that time, when I was moving over the old website to the new like domain, where my new website would be hosted, I had to shut down the website that I had out in the world. So ultimately, my website was down and it ended up being down for months. And, it was just honestly like one of those things where it was just like, just sit down for a couple of hours, knock out A, B, and C, and you can turn the website on and you'll be good to go. But I just didn't have it in me. So coming back from Barbados, it was like, all right, let's get this website done. Let's, get back to the offering of the free meditations I used to do on Mondays. I was doing these like Monday meditations during the pandemic. Like, let's just get back to the business of offering. Let's maybe, do a class, just kind of get back into, like I said, like the business of Rachel Voss Yoga. So taking these very slow, deliberate steps, and super excited to say website is up. I love it. I've got a lot of feedback and compliments on it. I've got a new t-shirt shop on it. I'm super excited about that. My Find Your Free t-shirt collection. And it's just a beautiful space, like just how I want this podcast to feel cozy. I want the website to feel cozy, right? So it's a space where you can come and just access everything that is me, everything that I do, my yoga classes, my podcast, the t-shirt shop. You can sign up for the book club. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can sign up for classes I'm holding. And there's still so much I want to build out with it, but I love it. I love it as a rebrand. I love it as a way to like reintroduce myself. Um, yeah, so I'm excited about that. I have taught a couple of classes. I actually just taught a class last night, beautiful restorative yoga class, all virtual. Um, and so, yeah, I'm just slowly trying to get back to me, by way of getting back to the purpose work of Rachel Voss Yoga. And so that trip to Barbados was really good to help break some things up so that I could start moving forward again. But now I've sort of been feeling like, okay, now I'm really getting into for me, it kind of feels like a next phase, right? Like, so the first phase is like the initial grief, of like losing a parent and just kind of trying to find your footing, after such a big loss. Now I kind of feel like I'm in the phase, the very beginning steps of like truly navigating life without dad, right? Like feeling the pain and holding the space of what I'm feeling, the loss, missing him, missing my friend. I really miss my friend. Um, but not letting the sadness be so much in the driver's seat. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like I'm trying to control grief. I'm just trying to manage the sadness. Because if anything, I know my dad would want me to have just a full happy life. He wanted me to have a full happy life, when he was in the body. And, he would say like, don't let me stop you from living your life. Like, go enjoy your life, do what makes you happy. And so it's important to me, for him, you know what I mean, that I continue, to find my happiness and continue to live my life. So getting back to that. And so I feel like I'm in again, this next phase of like, okay, navigating life without dad. But what's now happening is I'm kind of, because I'm having to start new, you know what I mean, by way of getting back to Rachel Voss Yoga and getting back to Rachel Voss Yoga without my dad, and just all these different things, getting back to Rachel Voss Yoga from Georgia, it's making me realize the Rachel Voss Yoga I left behind in Maryland. And so now I've been feeling like this, not this heavy grief around Maryland, but there is just kind of like a sadness, right? Because it was something I had to let go of. It is something that I'm grieving. Again, from beginning to end, I built my life over the course of 21 years, in Maryland, moving there when I was 22, going on 23, and moving when I was 43, going on 44. So very significant time there. And that's where Rachel Voss Yoga was born. And it took a long time to get, my business off the ground, to kind of figure out what I was doing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any money. I didn't really know like what the end goal was. I just wanted to be happy. I wanted to make people happy. I wanted to create a sustainable living where I could support my kid and take care of myself. And I just wanted to be free, but do service, with my freedom, right? So I didn't really have like the plan. And so I had to figure it all out, like putting a business together, being an entrepreneur, doing the marketing, doing the promotion, just all of the things. Like I had to really figure that out. And so it probably took me like a good 2 or 3 years to finally get myself on a path of like, okay, I've got clients, I've got relationships with studios, I've got, corporate clients, I've got contracts now officially, like I'm getting somewhere, I have my part-time job to give me sustainable income, but I had a real space to try and make, Rachel Voss Yoga this, empire, if you would, that I wanted to create, right? To just really build this business. And what has been extra challenging is like I've never wanted a yoga studio per se. So it's not like the work was to create this brick and mortar or, to do something like that. It was really just like, I just want to create a business out of holding space. And what does that look like? Right. So just really trying to create something literally out of thin air. But also seeing it, through different teachers and different healing arts practitioners that I was drawn to. I would see people doing it, like holding retreats and just kind of being free spirit in the world, but anchored in the work, that was being offered. And I was trying to find that for myself. So it took me a good 2 or 3 years to kind of get some footing. And then surprisingly, when the pandemic happened, first in 2020, while I wasn't able to keep some of the corporate clients and all that stuff because everything had shut down, I was able to build a virtual practice and a virtual community. And that was really, it became the next step that I needed, but that I didn't really know I was looking for, because I wanted to figure out how to expand my business, but I'm just one person. So how do I do this without driving all over the place and going all over the place? Like, how can I create a sustainable business, with less moving parts? And then, I fall into this virtual model and it ends up being a great next step for me. And that's where I was. And I really built that up and started getting a vision around that. My website was originally like the new website was originally designed around me being this virtual model and all of this. Um, but then, that's when my dad, had the brain injury that he went through. You may recall from some earlier podcasts when I talked about my voice started being compromised. I grew a polyps on my vocal cord. And so like I had to take a break with my voice because I was like doing too much with my vocal cords. Voss had gotten into the school in Georgia. So like all of these things had happened at once. Um, and I just kind of had to stop, right? I had to stop what I was building. And then we moved. And I just kind of left, you know, my world behind that I had in Maryland and put down this virtual community I had built to focus on this new life I had just taken on, right? And so, you know, I've been feeling sadness over that, right? I've been feeling sadness over like, wow, like I had to let go of everything I worked so hard to build. And now I'm here in Georgia and, I bounce around studios, you could check out places, but I don't really feel like I have the yoga home that I had in Maryland. I don't have a yoga place where I can go and teach, where I'm known, to my students. I still have my virtual community, and I'm so grateful for that. And that's honestly been my focus right now of like where I'm going to rebuild. But I'm really in this place of having to rebuild, and it's making me mourn the life I've left behind. And so I realized, because the grief with my dad was so big, I didn't really have a chance to take time with that loss either, right? And even outside of Rachel Voss Yoga, it was just my life in Maryland. Like the places I would go, the relationships I had, the friends I had, the people I could just pop up and see, being in close enough proximity to New York and New Jersey that people could drive down and visit me within 3 or 4 hours. Like it was a really sweet spot. And I have missed that. Um, Georgia has had its, you know, good points, right? It's not bad. It's not bad at all, to be very honest. Like my kid is thriving in his school, and with our whole move being inspired, really just being tied to him starting this new high school here. It's like, well, as long as he's happy, right? But we've got to be happy too. We have to, like, we're navigating this journey, right? So it's like, it is about my kid, but even though I'm 45 now, like there's still happiness that I want to feel, and accomplish and tap into, in my life. And so Georgia has been good. I have found a grocery store I love. We're in a really nice community. We're sort of just outside of Atlanta. We're not in Atlanta proper. And so it's been a soft landing. It hasn't been a bumpy landing as far as coming into Georgia. It's been a bumpy landing emotionally, but not Georgia itself. We've gotten to know people. David has friends in the area. We live close by to his brother. So, my mom just recently moved down here from New York, so now she's nearby. I have a brother here. So there are a lot of positives to being in Georgia, but I'm in that place a little bit where I was when I first moved to Maryland, right? Where I was always comparing Maryland to New York. Now I'm always comparing Georgia to Maryland. And it's like, what? Like, who would have thunk I'd be comparing anything to Maryland? Especially knowing that when I first moved to Maryland, it was like, get me the hell out of here and let me move back to New York. But like, things always kind of come, full circle in that way. And so, it's, I've been at this crossroads with all of it, which is why this episode is called The Middle, right? I've been at this crossroads of like, where does Rachel Voss Yoga go now, right? What what's next for me, like in my life, right? Like life without dad, like navigating this journey. Um, I thought I would talk more about it in this episode, but I realized I've been talking for a while now, and I do have to be mindful of my voice, and there's so much to share. So there'll be more episodes to come. So we'll talk a little bit more about my fertility journey in another episode. I do talk about it in one of my earlier podcast episodes, but we'll kind of get into the update of like where I am and what's happening in another episode. But know that I'm still on that journey, and being on that journey in my 40s, and at this age of 45, it's a lot. It's a lot emotionally. It's a challenge of faith. It's a lot that comes with it. And so I'm at a crossroads there too, right? Like what happens, if this doesn't happen, right? Like what is life like without this child that I want to bring so bad into this earthly plane, right? So there's this crossroads of that. And again, just this crossroads of like, what's next for me and my business? How do I rebuild here in Georgia? How do I get a community again? So it's just felt very much like this middle squeeze. And then you just put in the idea of like middle age of being 45, and I feel it, right? I really feel it. And that's been a journey in and of itself to navigate, right? Like I'm grateful to be in my 40s. I often say like it's not old, even though we can what's the word, like self-deprecate sometimes, and sometimes say like, oh, I'm old, oh. But really I'm like, no, like God forbid, but if I would like to pass away today, I'm sure people would say, oh my God, 45 is young. Like she had so much life ahead of her, compared to my dad, who was 78 when he passed. And even then, I felt like he had so much more life in him. And so, but it is like, it's not 25, it's not 35, it's not 15, which is my kid's age. And I feel like, oh my God, I remember being 15. I remember what I was going through in 1992 when I was 15 years old. Um, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it is just this very interesting space of like, I'm older and I'm wiser and I've learned some things, but I also don't feel as quote unquote old as I thought I might feel when I was 20, thinking about what life would look like at 45, right? Like, in some ways, I feel better than I felt, in my 20s and 30s. In some ways, I'm more confident. And, I very much have had those moments where I'm like, geez, I wish I had this confidence, this admiration for my body, whatever it is at 20 that I do now, because my goodness, right? But at the same time, it's like you had to go through the things to get to the place at 40, 45, to have that wisdom, right? To have that awareness. Um, so, but I don't feel like this, again, quote unquote, like old age, right? The only time I ever feel that is on this fertility journey, because my goodness, science is like, what am I considered? A geriatric, you know what I mean? Like geriatric pregnancy is what I'm trying for. So science and fertility will definitely make you feel old. But I still, I feel like young in some ways. Like, I feel like, with Voss, like I'm a cool mom. You know what I mean? Like I don't feel, like for me when I was 15, like 45 was like shoulder pads and like big suits for women. Like it was just, and I feel like it doesn't look like that. Um, and there's still so much. Like I'm trying to figure out with my life, what do I want to be when I grow up? You know, so much of my life that like I thought I would have together at this point feels still very much like something I'm trying to just figure out and put together, right? But at the same time, I am responsible for a 15-year-old, right? I do have to help my son navigate this world. And then, I am in the place where parents are getting older and parents are passing and parents need a little more time and attention, right? So my mom, she's in great health mentally and physically, and I'm super grateful. But, she's also at a place where like I need to tend to her, at times and check on her and all of that. And so it is very much this middle place of feeling the squeeze between being a parent to your kids, still being a kid to your parent, but then also having to be a parent to your parent, and then still also having to parent yourself because parts of you still very much feel like a kid, right? Can you keep up with that? So, frankly speaking, it's been like a mindfuck of a place and a mindfuck of a space to navigate. Um, and to navigate this space with the grief and with all this like physical change in my life, right? It's just felt like a lot, to kind of to manage. Um, and like I said, I've been doing my best to show up with it all. Um, but now I'm in a place where I realize that now, right? Like I feel like I'm in this place where now I'm like stepping outside of myself, which is something I invite when I teach yoga and meditation, right? To practice witness consciousness, where we kind of like envision ourselves outside of ourselves and just analyzing and scanning and observing like what's going, not actually not even analyzing. So we don't want that analytical mind. We just want to observe, right? Like just notice what's going on. And I kind of feel like I'm in that place where it's like I'm stepping back and I'm kind of noticing all of that. And it's like, okay, let's just take it one step at a time, right? So, how can I have more ease with myself with all of these different things that I'm trying to navigate? And ease was honestly the word that I chose for this year, right? Like, so, at the beginning of the year, we might have an intention, abundance or prosperity or a new home or, something like that. And for me, it was ease. I want ease in opportunities. I want ease in my life. I want ease with myself. I want ease in how abundance comes to me. So how can I find that, and give myself grace? And one area where I've been trying to do that again is with Rachel Voss Yoga, because while I do get in these spaces because I'm human of like, oh man, in Maryland I had, I missed this in Maryland. It's like, okay, but we're in Georgia now. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And when I take the pressure off of myself and allow myself to look at myself with more ease, it can actually be exciting. It can be fun to create a new dream and to build a new dream. It's just that here's where 45 comes in, because it's like, listen, I need to know. You know what I mean? Dreaming at 25 was one thing. At 45, I need to know, right? But, you know, it's also like it also can be exciting. And so, yeah, that's where I am. I feel like I've said so much. But it just all feels like it's very much from the heart, a very long stream of consciousness, if you would. But that's where I am. I'm in the middle, and I'm trying to navigate. I'm trying to find the next steps, or follow, not even find and follow, the next steps. Like, there are things I'm intentionally doing and I'm following the steps that way. And then there are things that it's like I just have to get back to that space of doing what feels good and move from there. And so I may not know the path, 10 steps ahead or 10 years ahead, but I know enough to follow this feeling to move from one step to the next. And that's kind of where I am right now. And so, again, I'm putting my website together. I'm rebranding my website, really excited about having this presence, back in the world by way of having that website. I wanted to do t-shirts for a long time. Super excited to now have, my Find Your Free t-shirts to offer. Really excited to grow my store on my website in general. I've got some super great ideas, so I'm really excited to grow that. I'm excited to be recording again. I don't think that I will wait another year to record again. Might be a couple of weeks, but it certainly won't be another year. And, as I get myself back into a groove, I do want to get back into the place of recording every week and just really allowing this to be a more consistent space, right? That people can tune into and tap into. So I want to be that. I want to be that consistent space, with my podcast, with my yoga offerings. Um, so check out my website, when you get a chance, rachelvossyoga.com. Send me an email, let me know what you think. And yeah, yeah. And you can also check in my website to stay connected with me with classes that I'm holding. So today is Thursday, March 9th, when I'm recording this. I think this will probably get released next Tuesday. So I did teach, like I said, a restorative yoga class last night. I do have a class coming up this Saturday, but if I do release this podcast on Tuesday, the 14th, which I think this is when it'll be released, I have a restorative class coming up on March 16th, and it's virtual, and you can do all the cozy things from the comfort of your home. So yeah, just taking it step by step, and like I said, getting myself back out into the world, and just seeing where we go, from the middle. um so with that, I do want to share two things. I was going to share one and then the other, and then I said, I'll just share both, because both of these things that I want to read, that I want to share, relate to the space that I'm in now, and they both just felt too beautiful not to share. So the first thing I'm going to read is actually a message that comes with this oracle card deck I have. So I have this beautiful herbal astrology oracle card deck that I love, love, love. And it uses the guidance of different herbs. It uses astrology, planetary placements with regard to the herbs, just to help give guidance, by way of pulling cards. And so the other day, I took a bath and set an intention with my bath of just getting clarity, of bringing abundance into my life, of opening up new opportunities, new channels for creativity, just to support me, in this place of rebuilding, right? And of coming back home to myself. And took the bath, took it with all this intention, put salts and herbs in it. And then after the bath, I decided to give myself a face mask. So a real, moment to indulge in self-care. And while my face mask was setting, I felt the call to pull a card from this herbal astrology deck. And the card I pulled was for calendula. And it had this beautiful, just kind of the historical message behind calendula and its properties. But then it had a beautiful message with regard to guidance of how to work with the card and how to work with calendula. And I wanted to just share a piece of that message. Calendula's gentle and abundant power reminds us of the realms of light. To be allowed entry within those angelic realms requires childlike innocence and humility. Don't allow pain from the past to disable your ability to dream a new life. Calendula represents the pure impulse to create, vitality, and creativity needed to step into a new journey. The radiance of calendula is a superconductor. Be very aware and selective with your intentions when using her energy within a ritual, as she greatly amplifies your intentions. And I just want to repeat this one line that really stuck out for me. Don't allow pain from the past to disable your ability to dream a new life. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, like, especially right after taking this intentional bath, right? Because that's kind of what it's felt like for me, that it's just been a very bumpy ride emotionally. And in some ways, I've been stuck in that. I've been holding on to that. A friend of mine even said to me, it's like you're rebuilding. Actually, it was my niece, not even a friend of mine. It was my niece. We were talking last week, and she said, it's like, your life in Georgia, your dad hasn't really been a part of that. And this new life you're having to rebuild, like he's not a part of that. And when she said that, I could automatically feel the resistance I think I've been having to this new life, because it is this life without dad, right? Like it is, there's so much I want to share about living in the South with my very, New York father. So much I wanted to share with him, but, outside of, just having that spiritual relationship, I haven't been able to. And so I appreciated when my niece said that to me, because, yeah, it helped me to realize the resistance. So reading this line, don't allow pain from the past to disable your ability to dream a new life. It's like, yeah, like give yourself permission. Like it's okay to dream a new life. It's okay to start again, right? Like it's okay to begin anew. And, there's that quote, I'm going off the top of my head, but it's like, you have to let go of like the old you and the old life to really allow the new you and the new life that you want to create, that you want to manifest, to give room to let that, to create the space to let that life in. So yeah, that really resonated with me. And so I just felt called to share that with you. And finally, the other passage I want to read, just again because it's today's date and the message is aligned. But it's from Melody Beattie's Journey to the Heart. Y'all know this is a favorite of mine. A book on daily meditations on the path to freeing your soul. And again, because today is March 9th, when I'm recording this, I'll share the March 9th passage with you, which is called Let Your Visions Guide You. Visions are different from dreams. A vision is a picture that comes from the soul and comes out through the heart. A vision is a small glimpse of light that shines and shows us our path. It is a quick flash of something that hasn't happened yet. It may tell us something about today or 10 years from now. Visions occur when our souls look at the map for our lives, get a sense of where we're going, and tell our hearts how to find that place. The more conscious and clear and direct we are, the more we can tune into and help create the highest vision for our lives. What do you want? What would feel right? What do you see yourself doing? Be clear and concise, then let it go. Sometimes when we run out of dreams, we have to rely on our visions, these small glimpses of light, to lead the way. Learn to see the visions in your heart. Learn to trust them. Learn to help create them. Allow them to manifest themselves. When the path is dark, learn to be comfortable with these small bursts of light. Let your visions guide you home. I'm just going to repeat this line. Sometimes when we run out of dreams, we have to rely on our visions, these small glimpses of light, to lead the way. When the path is dark, learn to be comfortable with these small bursts of light. And so, my gosh, right? That's just like so aligned with like where I am, and, the energy of this podcast, the intention of this particular episode. A little bit, there's still things I dream, but what has come with this middle space is a little bit feeling like that, like, oh, I've run out of dreams, right? Because there are things I thought I would have by now that I don't have. There are things that I lost. There are things that are probably never going to come to pass. There are things that I really still want, right? Um, and so it can feel like that. Like, what is the dream at this point, right? Like, what? And so I love the idea of visions being these small bursts of light because while I may not be clear or I may have to like recreate my dream, I do have these desires that I'm following, this desire to have another baby, this desire to podcast, right? The desire to share space. Like those are, what I love to call, it's like the internal GPS, like our heart guiding us, right? And so maybe we don't have all the steps, maybe we don't have all the answers, maybe we don't know like what's next, but we know there's a calling in our heart. And sometimes the work is just entrusting the call and showing up. And, a little bit, maybe a lot of bit, that's where I am right now. So let your visions guide you, and just have ease with yourself. Hmm. So, with that, lovelies, oh my goodness, it feels so good to be back. Like I said, I'm definitely planning to get back on a more regular basis with this podcast. I promise it will not be another year. In fact, David and I, in this space where I've been off, have come up with a really cool idea of how to grow this podcast. So it might take some time to get it to that space, but it's a space where I want to invite other women in to talk about their journey, of finding their free, maybe adding some videos. So there's a lot that I want to do, with this space. So it feels good to be back. I hope that this episode, this conversation, this space I shared was a benefit for you. Um, and as always, may we all be happy. May we all be free. May we all be peaceful, easeful, useful, and joyful. The light in me honors the light in each and every one of you. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon.